Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Susan Johnson. I'm a financial coach. I have been in the business close to 18 years, and what I do is work with employees to learn more about their retirement planning, whether it's budgeting, investment related, or anything financial. I'm here for you. And at the end, we're going to show some information how, if you'd like to book a one on one virtual, that will be possible. But before we get going, we're going to have a great conversation today talking about deaccumulation, which is a fancy word for saying, how do we spend down the money that we spent all these years savings? But before that, I want to introduce my lovely colleague, Diana Zhao. Diana, tell us
Hi,
about yourself.
hi. Thank you so much for that, Susan. Hi, everyone. My name is Diana Zhao. I am also a financial coach. I've been in the industry a little bit over a decade, helping clients, just like Susan said, throughout their financial journey, regardless of what stage they're in. And it's such a great topic to talk about now that we're in the closer to the final stage. How do we make that transition into our retirement? And to sort of do some housekeeping. But first, I'm going to have a poll question come up for us to think about how confident do we feel about our current retirement plan that's coming up. And feel free to answer how you see best with the options there. But a little bit of housekeeping for our next session. It is set to be on December 10th at noon Eastern Time, 12 p.m. Eastern Time. And then for anyone in our audience who is doing like a wellness program or some kind of bonus points program, the code word for today's session is sweater weather. It is starting to get chilly out there, so get your sweaters out. And the code word again is sweater weather.
So back
Um,
to our poll question. I'm going to read it. How confident do you feel about your current retirement plan? A, very confident. I've got a solid plan in place. B, somewhat confident. I'm saving, but not sure it's enough. C, not confident. I need to get serious about planning. And D, I haven't started, but I know I should, and I haven't yet. So go ahead and answer that. So go ahead, Diana.
yeah, no, thank you so much for that. I would say these are such a good thing to start thinking about as we bring up the presentation here to start our conversation. It's a good idea to start planning what's to come, right? Because all we've been doing is working and time has been going by, which has been great. And we're all excited to get to this big goal of retirement. But what are you going to do? And as you're thinking about that planning and what fun things you might be considering, you do also then I think that will then help lead you to ask, how much is retirement going to cost? What does retirement actually mean to me? And how that can look like when I am planning for that point in time. I do see some answers coming in here from different folks providing their answers. And thank you so much for doing so. I'm seeing some B's, some D's, some C's. Okay, so not seeing any A's, which is okay. Hence why you're here today to have this conversation to talk about what we're doing. Because it is really important. Your retirement and thinking about where and how long you have until retirement. And also, a keynote for those of you who are in our audience who have spouses or partners, you want to think about what it looks like of retiring together. You may have different plans for your retirement and how that could work for the future. So you want to start asking those questions. I like to give the example of my parents. My mom is already retired. She got the travel bug and she's traveling here and there and she loves to do it. On the other hand, my dad, he loves to work. He's been a track and field coach, enjoys it so much. And I don't plan to think that he's going to retire. So he's just, funding her retirement as she travels and enjoys herself. So you want to then start looking, okay, as a couple, what are things that we want to do or what we like to do and how that could adjust for the future as you're planning. Also, when you're considering when you want to retire, some folks could say, I could retire tomorrow. If I could retire tomorrow, that would be the best thing. Or some say, I really enjoy what I do and I want to work, many years into retirement to see what that could look like. So that's also important to consider. For those of you you are thinking about an early retirement, consider that if you do retire early, you are reducing sort of the length of time that you have for saving to get to where you want to be and growing your funds. And then,
Diana, excuse me, do you see the presentation?
oh no, it hasn't come up for me
Yeah,
here.
because I see you're covering the topics. I want to, here we go. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Oh, it popped up there. I guess I'm already on the next slide because these are questions of thinking about what you want to do, which I already started talking about. So if we can go to the next slide, when you're thinking about early retirement, what should you consider? As I mentioned, you have less time to sort of build your savings, right? Because if you decide to retire, let's say in your 50s or maybe really early 60s, you then now have more years in retirement. And we are seeing folks who are living longer. So think about that. Also, if you retire early, how early are you planning to retire compared to when you want to start collecting for Social Security? That's also really important. And then I think of that, when we talk about Social Security, always Medicare comes to mind. So your medical, what's medical going to look like? Because usually Medicare doesn't kick in at 65. And Susan's going to talk more about that a little bit later. But start thinking about, okay, with healthcare, if I do retire early, what that could be. And if for those anyone out here, if your job still gives you some sort of pension, what does it look like on when you can actually start taking money from your pension for your retirement years? Now, on the other side, when we look about delaying our retirement, things look a little bit different, right? We have more years to work. And because we have more years to work, then we have less years that will be actually retired and spending that money. Now, while you're still working, if you enjoy what you do, great. Love to hear it. It also is actually really beneficial for your mental health, right? It keeps the brain sharp because you're still doing things. Those who decide to work longer, you might be doing so because you plan on delaying your Social Security that you're going to use when you are spending also your savings together. So matching that up, or if your spouse is, and that's going to be different, maybe someone decides to retire early, the other one decides to retire later because of Social Security, that could start to affect things. And then for those of you who do decide, okay, I'm going to work a little bit longer because I am enjoying myself, but maybe I'm going to start to think about retirement and then maybe retire or start working in retirement because you may have retired early and go, I want to go back to work. What you want to consider in doing so is right now that you're going to start taking an income again, you may, be able to adjust how you were saving or the money that you were taking out from your savings account. You also want to consider what that's going to do for your healthcare benefits, especially if you've already started collecting Medicare or not, how that could be affected. Also, if you plan to start collecting your Social Security in retirement, we'll talk about more of that while you're still working. I mentioned some non-financial benefits that, you're being more engaged, you're still active with your peers and what's going on. And because of that activity or people being more engaged, we are seeing, more retirement programs coming up where folks are not necessarily retiring, but they start to work part-time, then full-time, or they may switch to like consulting, something of that nature to then still enjoy what they were doing at work, but then have some free time with their family and friends to do other things. And
So
that's really
Diana,
important.
that's a really good point because our work environment right now is so different from when our parents, were retiring. They were just looking
Yeah.
to, I don't mean to be, facetious, but, sit on the porch and enjoy
Yeah.
life. Whereas nowadays, like you said, people are going part-time. Everybody seems to have a little side hustle where they're able to, earn some kind of income, which that can help a lot in retirement. So it's very interesting times, and I think it's good. It gives us options.
Lens to the next slide. Because folks are living longer, it's interesting to see how that's adjusting, right? Healthcare is getting better, and so technology is getting better. People are being healthier and living longer, and so to avoid that sitting on the couch feeling, That also has something to do with it as well. And then maybe plan for more things to do. This is really important when we think about the next slide when we're looking at our goals, right? Because this all is about retirement planning goals. How can I maximize my retirement? Number one, to have the most fun, to really enjoy what you have been working so hard for. And then making sure with what you want to do that you've saved up enough so you don't, use up all your savings. What you've accumulated can now turn into income and work for you. And then you're also planning for maybe any unexpected life events that could come up. With the answers that we're seeing with that first question, I think that's a great way of thinking about, okay, this is to come in the future. So then you do feel better about the planning. As you're thinking about that, and before I transition it over to you, Susan, to start talking about the retirement income planning process, we have a second poll question that states, where are you right now in your retirement planning journey? It's the first one is A, I'm on track, I feel good. B, I'm still saving and I want to do a quick check in on my plan to see how things are going. C, I haven't started yet, but I'm thinking about it. Or D, I have no idea. With that, to help answer this question as well, let me turn it over to you, Susan.
All right. Thank you, Diana. So, really good food for thought. And I hope those of you that are out there and thinking like, well, I'm never going to retire, it's going to come a day and it's going to come quick. So those things Diana went over are some really good food for thought to get thinking about what is it you want to do, because we don't have to define it now, but just start thinking about it. So as the time approaches, that plan is in process. So part of this process is this planning process, and it's broken up into this circle here. And I think the best way to start is over on the right where it says over here, estimate how much income you'll need. That's first and foremost, because if you don't know that, you really can't begin the process. And we're going to see in some slides coming up that the average financial person, advisor like myself and my colleagues will say anywhere from about, they say 60 to 90. I say 70 to 80% of your current salary that you're at. Take 70% of it, just to start and figure out and work from there. So from that point, we go over to, we have to consider what our major factors are that are going to maybe disrupt our planning process. And one big one, which is not our friend, is called inflation. And right now, inflation is running around, 3%. And that excuse me, really factors into what it is that we saved. So we need to know, how are we going to curtail that, especially in our deaccumulation process, which means how are we taking money out. So if you're somebody in retirement now, and I'm just making up an example, maybe you're taking out 50 grand a year or 10 grand a year or whatever it is. And each time you increase, or each year you increase it 2%, 3%, 5%. What is that number? That has to be factored in as part of the planning process for those people who are, at retirement's doorstep. So now we get into the next one, which is, Diana mentioned this earlier, total income from Social Security, pensions, that has to be factored in. And you have to really look at all sorts of income. That little side hustle that you think is nothing, maybe you're somebody who mows lawns on the weekend, or you help out and you fix things for the neighbor and you actually bring in a couple grand a year. Write that down. You want to look at every single source. And I always recommend my handy dandy, oops, can you see this? It's a notebook. And I'm big on notebooks. I'm old school. I like to write things down. So get yourself a notebook, call it retirement planning, call it, my dream, whatever you want to call it, and just start writing things down so that you can, have a running track, which will implement in the back of your head what's going on. So from there, we figure out what is that income we need. So let's say I'm going to pick a number, an easy number, 100,000 you're making. You're going to take 70% of that. That's $70,000. Okay. So from there, we're going to say my Social Security is 30,000. I'm going to say I have interest coming from stocks and bonds and dividends or something. We haven't even talked about retirement yet. That's like 20,000. So when I subtract that, I'm left with this next over here, the gap. That is our gap that we need to identify. So now you look at it and say, well, how am I going to fill that gap? And that's where you're going to go by Diana's principles. Do I work a little longer? Do I get a little part-time job? Do I work part-time? Do I have something that I do on my own that's going to create a business? All these things to factor in so that we can, quote, bridge that gap. So just wanted to point that out. Sounds like a lot, but you know what? You take it one piece at a time. And again, this is here, our annual income. How much are we going to need? And the guidelines here, they have 60 to 90. I like to say 70 to 80% roughly. But again, it's going to fluctuate. And that's the funny thing about when you look at investing or retirement planning, it's not a one size fits all. So you can say, hey, my neighbor's doing this or my friend's doing that, but it has to go by what you're doing because everybody has different goals at retirement and you want to plan them out your way. So look at the general guidelines, which would be, we already mentioned this percentage we need. We consider our expenses and that knowing that they may change. A big thing for people looking towards retirement, they tend to look at what their biggest expense is. Diana, what do you think their biggest expenses that they have? Or it could be an asset too.
Yeah, I was thinking the home, right? Your mortgage.
The home.
You still have that, yeah.
Exactly. And I'm finding that they're looking at it to say, hey, we're going to rent out our home while we travel. I just had a conversation with a lady today. She's got 4 more years and she wants to go to Europe and figure out how they can travel for several years. So how's she going to rent out her home? Someone else might say, we're going to downsize and, go to Florida, get a condo. Maybe you want a tiny home in the woods, right? Kind of rough it and live off of nature. Whatever it is, it's going to appeal to somebody. So we have to factor in our costs for that, which is, these special retirement pursuits. So Diana, let's talk about the hobbies. What do you think most people's biggest hobby is at retirement?
Oh, I know mine is travel. So I'm just going to say I'm part of everyone else who wants to travel.
There you go. I mean, I have friends of mine, I ain't names, but they love golf. And the thing about, what do we know about golf? It requires a lot of time, especially when you're starting out.
Yeah.
And it requires a lot of money. So you can take it to whatever level you want. You can do, local, you can take little trips here and there. But what if you're somebody that your goal is, I want to travel, I want to go Pebble Beach, Hilton Head, and I want to be there a week, or I want to go to, where's another good place? I think like Ireland might be good for golf, I think. So whatever it is, these are all possible if, guess what? You start planning. You can't see my notebook. You start planning. So again, make this list, look at these expenses and, start planning, what you dream, because if you can't dream it, right, we can't do it. You first have to put it in your head. So now this topic I hate talking about, but it's so pertinent. It's healthcare because it is just crazy and hopefully we will get it somehow, controlled. But Medicare, you brought up earlier, and, it starts at age 65. We have certain portions of it, Part D, prescriptions. We have supplemental, again, filling in that gap, the Medigap. And then, Medicare does not cover long-term care. So we have to be realistic in that. And in the bottom, I put over here for those that we're not going to spend a huge amount of time, but for those that maybe are not familiar with Medicare, they have 2 sections and they call it typically, they call it unbundled, which is our traditional coverage. And that's where you have Part A, you have Part B, D, and the Medigap. And you can go primarily any doctor that's within the coverage period, but the bundled, the Medicare Advantage, is called Part C, and it's like an all-in-one plan, and you're kind of in a network situation. So again, just a little brief, shed some light on it for those that are maybe approaching that area, or those that, if you're not near that area, you have no idea. So at least it can shed some light, because many people, Diana, they're dealing with this with their parents, and that's how they're learning. So
yeah.
All righty.
So Planning ahead is a good way to look at it.
All right. Now, this is another one I don't like to talk about, but it's necessary. Long-term care. So the thing about long-term care, it's necessary. And there was a big push, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, probably longer than that, where, people were buying these policies. And, they're for people over age 65 who would require long-term care at some point in their life. And that would mean, going into a nursing home or needing that kind of care because they were unable to, care for themselves. Now, the average annual cost for a nursing home runs about the average $121,000. And that's just the average. So we know it's well above that. And, the other options for not having this is paying out of pocket, self-funding, relying on the Medicare or long-term care insurance. And again, if you're somebody out there looking into this, just be very careful. If you currently have a plan, I would say look at the situation as far as what you have, review your options, and make sure they coincide with what your needs are at this time, and just really review and make sure that premium, if it's going up, about it, or maybe it's not going up. And if you're somebody who is in the market for it, just make sure that you are looking at plans that you're comparing them to other plans, and also make sure that they're highly rated. There's rating agencies out there, and there are ones called AM Best who rate insurance policies. There's Moody's, and then there's S&P, and you want to make sure they're like A rated or above. So very important. Diana, maybe you had a bad connection. You're back. Thank you. And we just went over the long-term care. And then some major factors to consider is, we already talked about the accounting for inflation, looking at our purchasing power, understanding how taxes are going to reduce that, your income and your take home from taking out of various plans. We're going to get into that towards the middle of the presentation. And we want to evaluate potential risks, such as market volatility. Okay, today in the last couple of days, market been great, doing wonderful, it's up. But what if all of a sudden you're going to retire to next year, the end of this year, or whatever, and the market's down? Well, hopefully what you've done is not just kind of winged it and said, all right, I'll deal with it when I deal with it. But again, we've planned for this process. So if a market downturn does happen, you're prepared. It's not affecting you. Why? Because you've planned. And I want to just point in one thing, that here, as part of our association with you out there, we have advisors we work with that will be happy to help you work in a strategic game plan, so you're not waiting at the last minute to be, at the mercy of the market. And so this slide here really looks at, what inflation does. And again, we're assuming our 3% inflation. And what does it look like really over 25 years? So it will cost you over $100,000 to buy the same good. So let's look at this here. So today, let's assume there's a product we want to buy. It's $50,000. And in 5 years, we can see, well, look at this. It jumped up to $57,963. In 10 years, it went to $67,000 and change. 15 years, 77, and then 90,000. But then in 25 years, 104. Diana, what do you think about this?
That's, and that's just accounting for 3% average annual inflation. And it's crazy how quick things can double. And we're preaching to the choir of the audience, because we all feel it, right? We know what happened in the past and how much things cost in the past are dramatically different from what they cost today. So planning for what they will potentially future costs might be is really pertinent for your retirement plan.
So Diana, in the audience, this is what I call it. I call it eggflation. And the reason being, because we all know at COVID, eggs was a perfect example. We can use anything. We can use cars, but I like the egg because it's relatable. So maybe you were paying the $2.50 a dozen. What did it jump up to in the store? $4 or $5? And I was in New York at the time, because I was living there for, ever. And it was not unheard of to buy a dozen eggs for $15. So now I have my own chickens and I go out and get my own eggs. So anyways, just a little funny example of inflation. So now, before I pass it over to a couple more slides, and we're going to go back to Diana, the impact of taxes is definitely going to play in your planning process. So that's why I would really recommend for those people who are, within that 5-year period that they're going to be winding down to retirement, even sooner, depending on your asset size and how much you've accumulated, really reach out to a professional to help you. And, we're always here for that. But, ordinary income, and that just means whenever you take money out of any type of retirement account, guess what? We pay ordinary income. However, there are ones such as, and you heard of this, and we'll get into it in a moment, which would be our Roth. That's the beauty of the Roth, which came on board, I'm thinking maybe like 15 years ago, that now we have options when we're saving for retirement. We have buckets. We can go pre-tax, which we will pay that tax on the way out because we didn't on the way in. And then the Roth, which is after tax, we're going to take that money out tax-free. So it allows us to have options at retirement. For those people who have other portfolios that are non-related to retirement, that's where we're going to call these special rates for long-term capital gains, dividends. There's going to be taxes on those. So if you're somebody, what's big with the COVID, and, we had, how many times you see, this person, they're the day trader. They're trading and making, retirement, living on the beach, day trading in Bali. Not really realistic, but if that's something you are doing and you know what you're doing, then you're paying taxes on that because those are short-term gains. But in our retirement plan, we're doing long-term gains. That's what we're looking at, not so much in our retirement, but if we have a portfolio that we're holding things long-term. So our tax-free income for those people who have, again, non-retirement accounts, you might be a person who ladders bonds so that you get income. Every 5 years, you're getting income. If you're working with a financial person, they might help you do that. So that could be tax-free income. Your Roth could be tax-free, will be tax-free income. So again, different pieces of the puzzle that will help you plan and not just say, hey, I'm retiring tomorrow. Okay, I'm going to take money out, because now you're not in control of things that can happen. And lastly, our understanding market risk, which would be, as we mentioned, we're at the mercy of the market. What is the market doing? Is it up? Is it down? We don't want to be in that position. We want to plan so that no matter what the market's doing, we're okay. And we want to take advantage when it's up, also when it's down. And that's something that everybody can do, again, if you're planning properly. The reinvestment risk. That is, example is, let's say you're a person who likes to hold CDs in like your bank account because you know that, hey, you have maybe under $10,000 and you like the fact that it was getting a better rate than your savings. Well, guess what? When those CDs come due, and you now go and reinvest, like right now in the marketplace, we see interest rates going lower. So you're going to have to go in and invest your CDs at what? A lower rate. Therefore, reinvestment risk. And then lastly is interest rate risk. And again, if you're a bond buyer in particular, you like to buy treasuries in your portfolio, not your retirement account, but your regular account. You like to buy municipal bonds where you live, triple tax free. Then interest rate risk is going to play a part. If you like to invest in real estate in your retirement, interest rate risk will play that part. So, Diana, let's see what you've got for our sources of retirement income.
Absolutely. And before I do, I saw a couple of questions come in that I just wanted to answer to see if that helps some people. One came in asking, would it be safe to say to budget about $20,000 per year for healthcare on the open market before being eligible for Medicare? We don't know. It sort of depends. But one resource you can look at is healthcare.gov, that you can put in your information and it'll give you a better idea on what to consider based on your state, federally, how that would work. So then you can plan for if you're going to have an early retirement. That's where we usually see that.
That's
and then Go ahead.
Yeah, that's a good question because, many companies are adopting the HSA, Healthcare Savings Advance, which again, I'm not too up on it, but basically you can put, I think it's up to 4,000 if you're single, and it might be double that if you're married. And that would be a way to save towards this client mentioned 20 grand, whatever that number that you think. But I think it's a good, because we're going to have to do that, right? We're going to have to, yeah. So go ahead on the next one.
Absolutely. Then the other one asks, and you can answer if you want, can I move my money from a retirement savings plan to a Roth? And I think they're asking a Roth IRA.
Yeah. Okay. So what we call that is a Roth conversion. Okay. So again, a lot of these questions, yes, you can do it, but is it right for you? So I would probably want to ask the person, let's go through and see what, if you have $5,000 saved in the 401k and you want to do it, maybe it's not necessary. But let's say you have several hundred thousand, maybe you have $1 million, yes, that's definitely going to be part of the strategy. But when is it to do it? So again, by working with an advisor, you're going to be able to pinpoint the right time, as instead of just haphazardly, moving it and doing it. So I hope that helps.
Absolutely. But if you did have like Roth contributions in your 401k and you go to a Roth IRA, that would just go in easy. So you're just like Susan says, your situation depends on what you would do, which I think that question is great to lead into my sources of income, right? There's Social Security, pensions and annuities, and those two are sort of seen as guaranteed sources of income because on a monthly basis, you're going to get the same amount every month until, Social Security you can't outlive, but pensions and annuities until a specified period of time. And then your retirement savings and what you invest in, that's more variable because you can pick and choose how much you want if you want the same amount every month, just like the other two. So it's continuity. You could, but you can play with that. Now, starting off with, let's talk about Social Security. Now, this is sort of high level. Don't worry about reading all the information on the page. We'll cover what needs to be talked about. And you can find all this information on the Social Security website. And that link would be www.ssa.gov. But some information about Social Security. Social Security was never meant to cover 100% of your income. You have Social Security plus, any savings that you have that will help. The way they determine Social Security is they'll take your 35 highest earning years, and then that would determine your benefit that you would get. Also, when you start to collect is really important. You can start as early as age 62. And that's going to be the same amount you get. It's going to be a different amount than if you waited until your full retirement age, which for most of us is going to be 66 or 67. On the Social Security website, it'll tell you your benefit at 62, your full retirement age, even what your full retirement age is, and then the last age, which would be age 70, which tends to be the highest amount you would get if you waited for those who delay Social Security, when we hear that term. So consider what that would look like. Use that tool to help yourself planning for what it might be. Now, earlier when I was talking about working during retirement and Social Security, there's something that's called an income reduction that if you make too much, and it'll let you know that amount, it changes every year, there'll be a little bit of a reduction in your Social Security if you start collecting while you're working. So that's important as well for your planning needs. Now, when you do start collecting your Social Security, once you reach your full retirement age, if you started early, the amount you started with at a specific age, if you start at age 62, it's going to still be the same even at your full retirement age. However, once you hit your full retirement age and you're still working, that income reduction does go away at that point in time, which sort of helps when you're looking at it. Also, from now on to the future, they do inflation adjustments as well for your Social Security. So even after age 70, when you stop seeing that increase based on your age, there'll be an adjustment based on what inflation looks like. And that can really impact what you're looking as your first source of guaranteed income. From there, we look at pensions. And that on the next slide with pensions, some of us will have a pension, some of us will not. Some of us will have an annuity, some of us will not. But as the previous slide said, it's a three-legged stool. And if you imagine like a column or three-legged stool, if you took out the middle one being pensions and annuity, the stool would still stand. So if you don't have a pension, that's okay. I just wanted to tell folks, when it comes to pensions, if you have one, how are you going to receive your money? Is it going to be a single life annuity where it's just for you, or maybe a qualified joint for both you and your spouse to get some money even after you pass away? Also, you want to review the specific benefits, the explanation of benefits, to see what you're entitled to and how that would come out for you. Usually with both pensions and annuities, they don't adjust for inflation because they're considered one of those guaranteed sources, since they have to last a specific period of time, and you want to plan for that period. And so do the people who are sending you the money. They say, we want it to last this amount of time because this is what was agreed upon, to make sure that keeps going for you. And then with the next slide, an annuity.
Diana, I want to just mention a question, because this person was reading my mind. I was thinking this exact same thing. And the question is, how about rumors that Social Security will run out of funds and not be available past 2030? I was contemplating whether to bring that up because I didn't want to be like negative, but it's a realistic concern.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I'll say my thoughts, and then you say yours, and let's see what we come up with. I think it's a concern, yes, but I don't think it's going to go away. I really think it's going to be there. What I think might happen could be that maybe it gets capped off at somebody who's maybe 25 years old now, or, at something like that. But I feel like, at least for the people who are, quote, in the boomer and what's the next one, Gen Z, or, maybe people from 30 on, I think we'll be okay. So I want to remain optimistic about this. I feel like it has to be reconfigured. What are your thoughts?
So first I'll say these rumors are not the first time. I believe this happened before in like the 80s, I want to say. I was a youngin' then, but I believe there were talks about it running out, and then Congress got together and they made adjustments to the future payout of what comes out. Now, I believe what they have done, they do an annual audit of Social Security every year. And this is maybe why you're hearing those rumors that it's at around 2034, 2035. If nothing happens, there'll be a 25% reduction in what you're supposed to receive. So that 100% you would have received at your full retirement age then would turn into 75%. Now, that's if nothing happens. And of course, Susan, I also like your viewpoint of being optimistic. They've made changes in the past to make it work out in the long term. They can certainly do it again when we get much closer, as they're doing those yearly audits, to hopefully then expand that. And of course, if you are concerned that it's not going to be there, maybe you can save more, or maybe adjust how you're going to retire or when you're going to retire to account for that, or what all your income sources are going to look like.
So I have another question. So 62 would be the ideal age to wait and retire so that you get full benefits as of now, ? I think that, I don't know that it's the ideal, because again, everyone's situation is going to be different. And Diana, correct me if I'm wrong, or what you think is that if you are going to go at 62, I think you need to carefully plan for that, because that gap between 62 and the Medicare 65, right, Diana?
Mm-hmm.
How are you going to pay for that? Now, if you have a source, if you've researched it, then by all means, that could work. But if you just think, up 62, I'm done. And don't forget, that's going to be the minimum of your benefits. And then if you decide, well, I want to start working and get some other income, I think there's some kind of reduction process I'm not sure about. But I know if you wait to 67, you're in the clear. So what do you think?
Yeah, when you go on the Social Security website, you'll see your benefit at 62 and then your full retirement age, which could be 65, 66, 67. And the difference is pretty substantial. So it is going to be different from each of us when we're looking at what is ideal, but most folks wait until your full retirement age. So then you are getting that 100%, and you can account for that when you're looking at retirement planning. So keep that in mind. But your ideal, it might be your ideal, it might not be your ideal. But if you are planning, you can look at your overall sources of income. The next
Yeah.
one there would be annuities. And annuities is an insurance product that you buy from an insurance company. You pay premiums into it, and then come when you'll start needing the money, they will then give you a specified amount during a specific period of time. Does not adjust for inflation. Once you start getting it, that's what you're going to get. So once you cover your guaranteed sources, we'll go talk about next is your personal savings and what you have put away for retirement. Now, with your personal savings that we'll talk about here in the next slide is you are considering, what have I done? Right? What have I saved? What have I put away? And how am I investing what I've saved to then get us to the retirement that we want to have? With your personal savings, those would fill in the gap that Susan was talking about earlier, with the gap that you'll have your guarantees. There's going to be a gap that's filled in with your personal savings. You also want to consider how much you're going to take out and when you're going to take those out to fill in that gap for your retirement. Susan, if you go to the next slide here, there's also information about how you look at, I'm sorry, I think I already kept talking on this. Go to the next slide. Perfect. Then you also want to consider, right, your investments, and then when you're going to start collecting your required minimum distributions. That's your RMDs. Right now, those are slated to start at age 73 or older for any tax deferred accounts that you had. So like your pre-tax contributions in your 401k, if you have traditional IRAs, since that money hasn't been taxed, Uncle Sam at some point will come a knock in saying, hey, it's time to pay up those amounts. And how they do so is having you take out a portion. And you can include that with how you're going to look at your income sources at different points in your lifetime. The next slide there, when we are talking about your investments and asset allocation, this is a big factor when you are considering, okay, I'm saving, I have my market returns for my investments, but what am I invested in? And how will that change throughout my working career and also in retirement, right? When we're in retirement, Susan, we're risky. We take on more risks, so we're heavier and we're more aggressive and let's make our money. But as time goes by and we get older, we pump the brakes a little, right? And we
Pump the
become
brakes.
more conservative over time. So that will reflect, we have those bonds or those dividend paying stocks, which I believe shows up in the next slide, that you want.
Diana, I want to answer one question that came
Yeah,
through. And
absolutely.
this is something that, again, it's like the Social Security. It can go back and forth. It's controversial topic. And the question is, do you suggest paying extra on principal on your mortgage or taking the extra money per month and adding it to a 401k, especially if return is pretty consistent? There's several ways to look at this.
Right.
Okay, because I analyzed that for myself and I thought, geez, how nice it would be if I didn't have to pay a mortgage and I had all that money coming in and then I could do this, that, and the other thing. But in retrospect, there's lots of benefits you get for having the mortgage. Is, the interest is, on your taxes can reduce things. But more importantly, if you're someone who has had a mortgage for a while and you were lucky enough to get it, like I think my mortgage is around 3%. It might even be lower than that. But there are people who have it at high 2, and there are people that have it at 4, which is still considered good. But there are people out there that might have it higher. So I think that's going to factor into the decision. I think it's going to factor on what the balance is. If you have maybe 20 grand left, maybe when you've done your analysis, you look at it like, hey, it really does pay off, versus if you have a $200,000 mortgage, because now that money that you were going to put to it, why not put it in an S&P 500 fund in like a brokerage account, Fidelity, Schwab, whatever, put it somewhere, because you're going to make more money on that than you would paying down the mortgage. So I think that I can't give a yes, no, just some things to think about. What do you think?
That's true. And then what if you relocate? What if you just downsize? That also plays an effect in, should I pay off the
It's
mortgage
gone.
or should I invest the money? So, uh, great question to consider. So many different factors about a big step in your retirement planning, because you do want to, as Susan was saying, right? Part of your asset allocation is, what am I going to invest in, right? You want to make sure you're not too risky, but also not too conservative, that if you do make that switch, it pays off for yourself, right? And we also don't know how long will the market be doing well. When will the market
Yeah.
downturn? So there's so much to consider with that question, but it's a great way to start thinking, okay, what is the likelihood that how things will last for my savings if I decide to do this or not? And then
Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt your thing. So go ahead. We'll
no,
take
I
more
listen,
questions.
I love a good question. All our questions
Okay.
that we're getting are amazing. So please keep sending them in. I think if you go on to the next slide, I was talking about income. When we're more in our retirement years, we want income producing investments. Those are your bonds, right? Because they give you that interest, or bond funds, dividend paying stocks. Everyone remembers when Disney used to issue a stock certificate. They're a really big company. Those larger companies that provide a dividend, or like your Johnson and Johnson companies, right? We talked about CDs earlier, that if you wanted CDs for different things, you can use CDs to have that money coming in, or maybe use it as a cushion when you're in your retirement years. Tips, what those help: treasury inflation protected securities, are just like the name says. In retirement, you're sort of protecting yourself against times of high inflation, which again, when eggs were what? Dozen for $15, that makes a big difference when your investments are doing okay in those difficult times, that you at least can look on this side, even though you still have to, got to get your protein in, and your good vitamins from eggs, that you want to account for that in any rising costs. Um, I think there was a question that came in earlier, and I want to answer it because I'm already talking about inflation, that asked about, we see inflation will change over time with today's dollars compared to future dollars. How do we account for that? When you look at your record keeper's page, there's usually some kind of retirement planning calculator. And those calculators usually account for inflation, and they sort of give you projected numbers based on how much you're saving and how you're investing. How much money would you have for an income source in retirement? So I really like those types of calculators, because not only do they account for your savings, but how you're investing is really a big factor. With that, just because I saw that question, we're talking about inflation, I wanted to answer that. Let's go to the next slide here, where we look at, I saved it, how do I take it out? When it comes to withdrawing your money, your budget is key. Just like the question about the mortgage. Will you have a mortgage in retirement? What things are going to be different from today? If we know, the older we get, healthcare is naturally going to cost more because our bones get brittle, right? So how will healthcare adjust your expenses in retirement compared to now? If you have kids, will the kids be out of the house or not by the time you get to retirement? Or maybe you can sell the mortgage to the kids and they can pay off the rest of the mortgage while you invest your money in the S&P 500 and go to Europe and enjoy yourself. What that could also adjust. And then how you take out your money, will things that factor in is, when do you plan to retire? For those who retire early, you'll need to take out less compared to those who retire later. There's the 4% rule, has always been talked about, but it does look at a retirement around age 65, that you're supposed to add up all your retirement savings, take out 4% in year one, and then from the amount you get, adjust for inflation every year thereafter. But if you retire at, let's say, 50, 4% might make your money run out faster. Maybe you might do 3%. Or if you retire at 70, maybe you might do 5% because you have worked those extra years that you can take out a bit more. There's one that gives a little bit of flexibility, It's called the floor and ceiling approach. Unlike the 3, 4, and 5% rule, the floor and ceiling approach does not adjust for inflation. But what that looks like is when the market is up, you can take out more money. When the market is down and not keeping up with inflation, you take out less money. So I'll give you an example. Let's say the market is doing well. We're getting 8% return. Maybe in that year, you can take out 10,000 compared to a time when the market's not doing so well and you're getting about maybe a 2 to 3% return. Then in those years, maybe you're only taking out half of that, maybe 5,000 or a little bit less. So your money can keep going from there. With that, I'm going to flip things over and take it back to Susan to talk about orders of withdrawal.
Thank you. And, there's a question I saw that I want to answer. So this is a perfect segue, whoever sent that. And the question is, RMD is required only if not working, correct? And yes, you are correct. So how it works is that if you have left your job and you are at age 73, the magic age used to be 70 and a half, and it went up, I think shortly after COVID, to 73. And so if you are working and you're 73, you do not have to take that RMD. If you're 75, if you're 80 and working, you don't have to take it. But if you have that account like elsewhere, like for example, let's say your 401k is at your job, you have it, you don't have to take the RMD. But let's say you have an IRA at a bank sitting there. You would have to do that. So that's why you want, it's again, with the planning, I can't stop with the planning enough, because you have to get this coordinated prior to, because once you're at that age and you're not working, they're going to hit you for it. I'm going to expand upon some things in a moment. So let's talk about that. So when you're looking at the withdrawals, and Diana went over some of them, we're now going to break them up into categories, because most people look at their retirement plan as where they're taking money from, and that's the bulk of it. Whereas many people out there have their retirement savings, and then they have a nice chunk of change in what we call our non-taxable account, meaning just a regular account, regular bank account, or it's a Schwab account, a Fidelity account, whatever investment vehicle you use. And in there, they're putting in money and they're buying stocks, or they're buying funds, or they're buying bonds, or whatever they're buying. So we now have to, when, again, you're planning and winding down, we want to look at those two pockets and holistically get them together so that we can now work these strategies amongst both of them so that we can complete the game plan. So the first one up here is the tax deferred, and that's going to be our 401ks, our 403bs, our 457 if you're a governmental work employee, our IRAs. Now our tax exempts are going to be those Roth IRAs that you have. And then, as I mentioned, the taxable accounts are going to be the brokerage account, the savings account, where you have the CDs and that. And with that, we want to analyze the income concerns versus our estate planning concerns, because we've discussed all this, throughout this presentation, the income concerns. We didn't address estate planning. That's a whole nother long topic, but just to touch on it, many people these days are saying, well, first and foremost, everybody should make sure that you have in your retirement account the correct beneficiary. If you're married, it goes to your spouse, just like your spouse has to put you. But under that, you can put secondary. So make sure that's squared away first and foremost. Make sure, and especially if you have an account that's been transferred to a new provider, not always does that beneficiary go. So do your housekeeping annually, make sure the beneficiary is at par. And then from that concern, you want to look at, people look at situations and say, well, while I'm living, I want to set up various trusts so that my children's children, that's how it is, it skips a generation, and you can set up a trust so that they can enjoy that money while you're alive. But the average, most traditional is a revocable trust where it kicks in once you're no longer here. And that's what most people, would set up. So again, different types. Do you have a will? Do you have a trust? You want to make sure you can avoid probate, because nobody wants to get stuck in that. And,
Gosh,
how are you going to do this? And
yeah.
again, reducing the taxes that Diana touched upon. And then, your individual circumstances are going to govern this type of situation, and making sure everybody has a will, right? Diana, how many times do you find most people don't, because they think, oh, I don't have any assets, it doesn't matter. And it does matter, because whatever little you have or whatever you have, you don't want the state to make your decisions for you as to where this money is going, right?
Yeah, that's true. And you can get a will as early as 18, because even, let's say, if you don't have a spouse or kids and you have pets, who's going to take care of the pets? What
Oh
accounts do you
yeah.
want your loved ones to take care of the pets? So
Exactly. Big, it's so funny, because we've heard over the years, there've been, these mega wealthy people who have, passed away, and they left it to their cat or their dog, right?
yeah,
Have you heard those
yeah, yeah,
stories?
yeah.
I
Yep,
haven't
yep.
heard so many lately, but they're out there. So, okay, I want to touch on the required minimum distribution, because for those of you out there who are dealing with family members, particularly parents, that are at that age 73 and are taking their distribution or approaching it, I can tell you an easy way to calculate it. So we're in the prime year right now, because I'd say about the end of October, beginning of November is where you start getting your notices from your plan provider, whether you have a Fidelity 401k, an IRA from the bank, or even your accountant will kick in and give you information on what your RMD, required minimum distribution, will be. But an easy way to calculate it is this. So let's say, I'm going to use an example, a person has $100,000 in their account and they have no idea. If you just multiply it by 4%, you're going to get $4,000. If you have $1 million in that account and you multiply it by 4%, you're going to get $40,000. But if you're inclined to go to the government, irs.com.gov, and look it up, you can get the factor, which in this case is about, I think it's like 26, I wrote it down, 26.5 or something like that. You divide it by that 100,000, guess what you're going to get? 3,774. And when you took that 100,000 times 4%, you got 4,000. So look how close. The number's right there. So I always like to go above to know that you've exceeded, you've capped out what you need to take. So if you had somebody, had $1 million in the account, you did it by 4%. I told you, you got the 40,000, but your IRS number would be 37,734. So close. In case you're in a pinch where you're someplace and you want a quick calculation, that you can do. Now, it's very important that you take that minimum distribution, because if you don't, you will be penalized. And I think the penalty is like $2,500.
Actually, it changed. And I know the slide says 50%, but it's actually 25%.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah.
25%. Perfect. Thank you for calling that out. And the thing is, if you catch it right away, many times you can go online and get the form. It's like a form 5329. You fill it out, you send it to the IRS, and they can, in essence, waive it. And they just want to know that you took, action promptly and you realized it was a mistake. So just wanted to pick that up. All right. Here's a question. Timothy asked, so if I retire at 61 from work and have a reduced income, let's say 0, but take Social Security at 62, will that decrease my benefit calculation?
So, Timothy, what decreases your benefit is that you started at 62. That's the age reduction. Not so much that you decreased your income at 61. So then, because it's based on your 35 highest earning years. So even at 61, if you had earned 0, but the 60 and before were your 35 highest earning years, that's what the benefit is going to be based on. Now, what you'll see at 62 will be reduced compared to what you see at your full retirement age, and then from what you see at age 70. So it's the age rather than you having zero income at age 61 or retiring at 61. It's based on your 35 highest earning
Yeah,
years.
good question. Someone asked, does having a will avoid probate? So it doesn't avoid it. It just allows you to be in charge of who gets what. You still have to go through the probate. It makes it so much easier. You're not getting caught up in the red tape. So
yeah, it's sort of a way for them to like certify your will is real, because some people have written their will on a napkin and you've got to go to probate court and then the judge says, actually, yeah, that works, or no, that doesn't work.
Yeah,
But it is much more simpler with a will than without a will. Now, if you have a trusts don't need to go through probate. Setting up your direct beneficiaries do not need to go through probate.
Okay.
There was another question, sorry to interrupt, that
Go
asked,
ahead.
what are the downsides to the annuity? If not annuity, can I directly open an individual brokerage account and invest in a couple of stock funds? You can always invest in a brokerage account, a taxable brokerage account at any time. The main common downsides to an annuities is the costs is one, because costs could get pretty high, and any fees or surrender charges they may have if you wanted to pull out a chunk of money. And then the other part is that the distribution does not adjust for inflation. So when you start getting it, let's say you accounted, I'm going to get $500 a month. That's what it's going to be. You call them and say, hey, I need more. There might be some costs, or they may just tell you, no, you can't do that.
Exactly. And that's a big factor, because, it's kind of sold to people that, oh, get an annuity, you're locking in money, I'm going to get it forever.
Right.
Sounds good. But like you said, Diana, the cost. And what if all of a sudden that money, you need more, and you have a nice principal, 300,000 in an annuity, but you're getting 2,000 a month and you need more? Well, a lot of times you can't get it without penalty, or if even at all. I think that's what you were saying. So
yeah, absolutely.
All right. So I'm going to move on. We're almost done, but we're stopping and taking these questions. And I want to get through this so that we can take more questions at the end. So other potential sources of income. We did identify the home as being one source that people look at, to sell and say, hey, we're now going into our second phase of life and we're using this money for to satisfy what our goals are. Or we're going to rent this out and do whatever. So the home definitely plays a part in the process, and existing cash value life insurance. Here's another topic that, definitely is controversial, because not everybody needs it. I mean, certainly if you have a family, most people have it because it's necessary. Don't have a family. I have my little Shih Tzus and my chickens. So my life insurance policy is a lot less than what would be for somebody else. So I think, again, it's going to vary where you are, what's going on, and, how you maneuver. It can certainly play a great advantage in the estate planning process by having various life insurance policies. But what do you think, Diana?
Yeah, life insurance policies, I won't say, I'll say I don't have kids, but I do have pets. And oddly enough, I told my sister she's going to be in charge of taking care of that. And so I'm like, maybe you can use the life insurance money to do whatever you want with them. Like, please take them and have a great time. So I know that might be silly, but I just don't want her to have to worry about that burden, right? So that's as an example of somewhere you can look at it. So feel free. It is a topic that you do want to make sure you have what you need, especially if you have dependents and loved ones that you want to make sure they're okay.
All right. So why tax efficient withdrawals matters. And a lot of this we went through today. So just to touch base, what it's going to do, being efficient with the withdrawals that you set up, keeping more of your money and maximizing, minimizing the taxes. And that is, number one strategy here on these withdrawals, so that you can stay invested and keep that money growing for you, therefore taking advantage of it, making the savings last. Withdrawing smart and timing it, you can certainly lower your taxes. You can avoid penalty, and then, stretching out that income so that you can use it wisely over the course of time. And what else do we have? Maximizing Social Security. We are going to managing taxable income benefits to reduce the Social Security taxes and boost benefits. Whoops. And we're going to preserve portfolio growth, strategic withdrawals, help limit taxes, and protect your investment goal. Again, important, and looking at those. So again, I think we touched on this earlier where we were saying, some people look at, as I'm getting older, my portfolio is getting more conservative. Probably for most people. But again, there are a small few out there that say, you know what? I have this paid off. I have that paid off. No credit card debt, no this, that, where I don't want it that conservative. I want to keep it more aggressive or more up to the market. So again, what is that? One size doesn't fit all. Everyone's going to have a different investment preservation, strategy as far as their portfolio is concerned. Leaving more money behind and efficient planning. That would be, topping on the estate.
Mhm.
Did you have something?
I did, because just right when you talked about leaving more for behind, there was a question asking, wouldn't it having all accounts set up as joints with rights of survivorship avoid probate? You can't do that with all your accounts. For example, retirement accounts like your 401k. If you're married, it's only your spouse that can be listed there. And the account is not seen as a joint account. It's seen as your account and it's your spouse. Maybe you could do so for your house, but it depends on your state. Some might have different laws on how that's looked at. So not necessarily cover everything to avoid probate, but maybe for your state it could.
Yeah, good point. That's really good. So withdrawal orders and key strategies. And again, this is something that by working with a financial advisor, it's definitely going to be part of your game plan, because this is important. We touched a little bit on it, but again, looking at that, holistic picture of getting your retirement, getting your non-retirement account. And here we go up here at age, the sequence would be, I mean, this isn't always the case, but this is a good rule of thumb. Start with taxable accounts, your brokerage and your saving, as far as, withdrawing on it, because this way here, you're not tapping into the taxable situations. And then the next would be looking at those tax deferred accounts. And that's going to be, again, your IRAs, your 401ks, and then looking at that RMDs, because whatever my balance is, if it's 100,000 times that 4%, I'm going to have to I'll get $4,000. Where am I going to use that? Maybe I'm going to use it for vacation, but maybe I'm going to put it in my brokerage account and buy more stocks, or put it in the S&P fund, or whatever it is. And then lastly, using your tax-free accounts, which would be the Roths, and primarily that, and just looking at how is that money going to be withdrawn. And again, that's why an advisor can really help you, because you might have in your mind a way to do it, but then when you're talking it over with your advisor, he'll lay out various situations that'll be like, well, this will happen if you do that, that'll happen, and then you'll be able to make a decision that's more appropriate to what your needs are. And then the Roth conversions, they're very popular nowadays, Diana. People are doing it. I remember going back, I don't know, maybe 5-6 years ago, they were having incentives on doing the Roth, where I think the tax was reduced to do it. So these situations come up, and I guess they're initiated by the IRS saying, trying to promote it. But right now, it definitely is a strategy for people at retirement to start shifting, because not everybody has the Roth IRA. And that's why when I'm working with clients that are, I just say, new to the workforce, the newbies, maybe they just graduated college, and their question is saying, where should I put my money? Should it all be pre-tax? And I like to, explain it to them, but let them know that if you're contributing 10%, maybe you put 5 in pre-tax and 5 in Roth. I'm seeing a lot of the young people like to put the whole 10% in the Roth. Are you seeing anything like that?
Generally speaking, Roth, when you're younger, because you're in a lower income, right? You have to pay the taxes today. So you take advantage of that. So then you don't have to pay the taxes later. And then you don't have to even worry about conversions too, since you already took care of it ahead of time.
Yeah. And Okay, so at the bottom here, it looks like our take a survey is kind of, oh, there we go, good, it's out of the way. So we have, again, our various account types. We have our taxable, and when we're looking at our regular brokerage account, our bank accounts, if we have stocks, if we have mutual funds, we have capital gains and dividends under the classification of ordinary income that we will be paying. We also have ordinary income under our tax deferred accounts, because when we withdraw from our 401k, our 403b, our IRAs, well, I'll say the retirement accounts first at your employer, they're going to withhold the 20%. Okay, that's how they do it. It's mandatory. But in your IRA, there's not a withholding. You still have to take the taxes, but it's on you to do it. And I find most clients will, if they say they want to take $10,000 out of their IRA, they're going to just withhold the 20% right there. Many don't. They'll say, I'll take the $10,000, and when I do my taxes, I'll let my accountant will take care of it then. So again, whatever way works. And then our last bottom line is our tax-free. Our tax-free can be our Roth. Our tax-free could be in our regular account if we're a person who buys municipal bonds. Depending on where you live, they could be triple tax advantage, city, state, local government. That's New York, but most places on federal, state. But again, look at these things and see how they can work in your portfolio. So let's see what we got. So avoiding some pitfalls and personalizing your plan. We talked about missing the RMDs, how that can be big penalties. We don't want to do that. We know how to, kind of reflect that and get on it real quick by the form 5329 to do. Large withdrawals may increase the Medicare cost, the Social Security. We discussed that. Consider advanced tax strategies. Now, this is the time of the year that this is happening, whether you're working with your accountant. He's looking, if you're a stock buyer, like in your regular account, they're looking at, well, what have you bought this year that's at a loss? And maybe you want to take that now, sell the stock because it'll offset some of the gains. So those are things that are going on. The HSA, that's another triple tax event. If you're saving money for the medical under the HSA plan, charitable giving, and then those are about the main ones right now. And I can't stress enough working with your financial professional to tailor that. And at the end of this, if any of you people out there, our lovely audience, is looking to really, settle down with this, reach out to Diana or myself, and we will put you in touch with our people, our financial advisors.
Yeah. If you go to the next slide, so sorry to rush you, but if you go to the next slide so they can forward instead of back, they'll see the email where they can send us an email for if they want to talk to a financial person.
Yeah, financial education at wealthspire.com and NFP financial education at nfp.com. So yeah, this slide here just kind of summarizes everything. We went through it all. I think we really touched a lot on here, from, retiring to planning to taking income, Social Security, Medicare, estate planning, right? We hit it all.
Yeah, so you definitely it is a lot to plan for, certainly for the future. So we want to help you any way we can. And with all the great questions that come in, they're all really great. So let us know what you need. The next session will be December 10th at noon Eastern. And then whoever needed the code for your bonus points or wellness points, the code word was sweater weather. Please take our survey and let us know what else you want to talk about. And with that, folks, thank you for having us and take care.
Thanks, Diane. It was so fun working with you. Yes. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.